motivated.
The torrential rains that came after the quake was not the only reason why aid could not reach its recipients in time. Landslides from the quake also stood in the way, blocking roads and further hampering efforts by relief teams to reach the remote areas. It was days before heavy excavators and basic supplies like food started to trickle in to the devastated villages in Pariaman. Nature and time were not all that disaster aid teams had to fight against. Hassan, who heads disaster aid mission Mercy Relief, says the tougher fight is often dealing with the bureaucracy of the land.
Over the last 2 years, there have been locations where we moved into where the government has placed too much restrictions, whether in terms of visas, in terms of customs, too many restrictions that hindered the timeliness of our intervention into the humanitarian crisis.
We also need to understand that it's extremely difficult to get a big picture view and then to coordinate all these efforts. So sometimes arguably maybe even less coordination may be better so that each team is doing what they see need fit, and that might actually work out better than too much hierarchical organization or coordination.
International aid started to arrive in Sumatra shortly after the quake struck. The Indonesian government too has pledged close to $640 million for it.
Ini bencana alam, mari kita tegar dan tabah menghadapi.
But skepticism remains as to how much of it will actually reach the ground.
Tapi kami mengharapkan kalau dapat dari kami atau negara tetangga atau negara luar gitu ya, tolonglah membantu kami itu dengan cara yang jelas atau rumah yang nyata. Kadang-kadang jangan diberikan kepada yang pemerintah daerah hanya sekedar untuk dongeng itu masuk kantong, artinya akhirnya orang yang menderita tidak dapat hasil.
But despite the opacity of the system and systemic bottlenecks, experts point out there remains much that government, citizens and disaster aid agencies can do as the victims embark on rebuilding their homes and their lives.
You got to make sure there's no disconnect between the ivory tower and the guy living on the coast with his fishing boat. So that's where education and outreach come in. That's where good teaching in secondary and in primary schools and in community events comes in, and television comes in.
A lot of these relief NGOs should not just do relief work, but also do development work. And all the development and the NGOs that do development work should also look into disaster risk mitigation to actually not just uplift the lives of these people, the poor communities in the rural areas, but also to prepare them, for coming disasters. Whether it's evacuation, whether it's typhoon shelters, those are part of mitigating these risks.
Disaster preparation is not an option vulnerable countries like Indonesia and the Philippines can choose to ignore. Experts are warning that even as the region reels from the current string of disasters, the next big one looms. In 2004, in Banda Aceh, the huge 9.2 earthquake produced the largest plate rupture in recorded history. Its aftershocks led to an 8.6 magnitude quake in Nias a year later. And in 2007, a series of quakes shook Padang. Again this year, the 7.6 magnitude quake on September the 30th. All these earthquakes lie along the Australian-Indian plate that's slipping under the Eurasian plate. As it slips, the plate cracks. Each crack gave rise to an earthquake along the Sumatran region. At the current rate of convergence, there's one final crack to come. which geologists believe will produce the next big one. This scientists believe will be an 8.8 undersea earthquake followed by a 5 to 10 meter high tsunami again in Padang. It will be as high as the 2004 tsunami and high enough again to wipe out entire coastal communities. As to when, they can't tell. So the writing is on the wall for Padang. For the villagers living here, there's often little or no provision for their security by the authorities. Beringin is a shopkeeper who lives at Kubu Anau, 90 minutes drive from Pariaman town. His house collapsed during the quake. Fortunately, his family escaped. He's still living on the part of the house that's still intact. Beringin lived through the 2007 quakes as he did this one. To him, it makes no sense to leave his livelihood simply because a government scientist tells him to.
Memang tetap di sini, Pak. Ya, soalnya walaupun kayak gini, istilahnya kan ini rumah kita, tempat kita. Kalau kita cari tempat yang lain, susah, Pak. Cari lokasinya, gitunya.
Like Beringin, many a village's grief has given way to quiet acceptance. And these are the faces of disaster Asia. In time, their plight will fade from memory as other headlines take their place. As the world moves on, they'll have to continue to bear the reality of living